This is Find Your Magic, where we interview people who have found their gifts and the courage to live into them. I'm Tracy Feldstein, body and wellness engineer and owner of Hello Mellow Natural Skincare.
And I'm Jaime Gennaro, consultant and business coach. And each week we talk to entrepreneurs, artists, healers, musicians, and we find out what scares them the most and how they jumped anyway.
If you like what you see and hear, please hit like and subscribe and share us with your friends.
And in the comments, tell us what you're afraid of so that we can help. And then we'll help you even more when you come to the summit in person, January 7th through 9th in Ojai, California. The link to the information's all below.
See you soon. In this week's episode, I am going to be talking with Jaime Gennaro herself. We thought it would be interesting to turn the tables and let you get to know us better and see what is our magic and where our obstacles are and where our courage comes from, and just to get to know us better. So hello, Miss Jaime.
Hello. This is really funny, but I think it's fun because we've been on a journey of what this means and finding your magic, what it means for us. And just to like preface this too, a while ago, well, first of all, I'm just going to say, and then I won't usurp the whole thing, but Tracy and I have never met in person. I think that's a really fun thing to add to this conversation, but we have built what I think is like this amazing sort of camaraderie, and we're like colleagues and also mentors for each other and coaches for each other. It all came because we went into the pandemic in March 2020, and both of us felt called to kind of take this course, this online course, and we met in the online course, and we've been just like brainstorming ever since we met. And so just to say that like this process of us finding our magic is a pretty new process for us. And we want to take you all on this journey to show you that we're all in it together. And you can even meet someone in an online class and then realize, oh, why don't we just like go launch some stuff and do some crazy shit. So anyway, I love that. And we're all trying to find it and find these nuggets. So
totally. Yeah. And I think that just the process of us getting to know each other and coach and mentor brought out our magic and brightened it and supported. And we were like, wow, we want this for everyone. Like, what a cool experience to have someone be able to hold you accountable and help you see the shiny parts of you and the parts that you maybe never could see, and then take ownership, the experience of taking ownership, and how are you going to jump, and what are the things that come up, and how do you support someone through all of that. And so it's so fun. We were like, who else does this? How else do they do it? And how else can we support other people to get brighter and more magical and fill their lives with it? Because we are experiencing how cool that experience is, and scary at moments, and even after those scary moments, how rewarding, right? And like kind of epic.
Yeah.
So anyway,
exactly.
That's our experience. So Miss Jaime, tell me in your words who you are and what you do.
Okay, so it's still hard for me to nail that down, but ultimately I'm a business coach. So I help people who are either launching a business or have had a business for a while really grow into that business. And by grow, I mean not only financially, but also just energetically and spiritually, and people who are in businesses that are just helping them grow. I think all entrepreneurs are in a unique position to get the opportunity to push themselves in ways that you can't always do when you're an employee. So I help business owners, and I also help people who are in that career transition moment where they feel ready to jump, which is something we talk about a lot here, but they're afraid of numerous things. And so I help them really work through that fear. So I'm a career coach and also a consultant, because I also consult with businesses on, operationally, what do they need to do to grow and make changes? But I always mix in my little spiritual coachy guidance stuff, even when I'm in like financial spreadsheets. So
I love it.
yes.
So to me, that little piece at the end there is like starting to speak to what we talk about here, like the magic in it, right? It's like, you're like, I do this, this, and this, and then I also put my little thing on it, which to me
Yes.
sounds like, and that's my little magic. So what would you say is the part that feels like your magic, like special to you? And, I call it your jam. Like it just feels like it fills you up and it's why you do what you do.
Well, you you helped me find that. I think I was doing certain things that I never really thought about or gave a name to, and I realized that that is sort of my secret sauce. Like I have a lot of experience growing businesses and working in startups, and that's generally like where my career has been. But the part about that that's unique is that I have always sort of been in this position to coach the business owners. And so I have to use this mix of my experience, which legitimizes me as a business coach, but also I use all this intuition. And so when I sit down with people, I really try to get a read on where is their true passion? Like, where is their true genius? Where is all their potential that's untapped right now that they're like ready to get into, but they just don't quite know how? And like, what's blocking them from really like getting in there and then just glowing? And so it's hard to talk about because I never really knew that I was doing that. But it's starting, I'm practicing more, like really leaning into that intuition side and trusting it. We talk about this a lot too. And this is something we're going to work with people on in the summit. Like, how do you like hear something come up or like feel it in your gut and then feel brave enough to say it out loud? And that's what I'm really leaning into and trusting, because I think that's where my clients really get the most benefit of working with me, is like, I can kind of like hone right in on certain things that they haven't said out loud. And then it gives them the freedom to feel like they can say it and live into it too.
Yeah. And at the same time, it's doing the same thing for you, it sounds like.
Yeah.
When you
Yes.
do it. So is there any places that feel sticky and hard? Like what's the challenge of that for yourself?
I think the trust is the biggest challenge. Like, you and I talk about this a lot, like in the I keep talking about the summit because it's like my safe space. But, we wanted to create this summit so that people who felt a little bit like left of center and a little bit like odd or awkward in their lives, or like didn't feel like they had like the community to say the things that they wanted to say. We want to create a safe space for those people. And I think that I'm still in a position where I come from this very like corporate background. Well, it's ironically not corporate, but feels corporate. Like it's very like straight and arrow business world. And I'm trying to mix into that business world ideas that normally people don't talk about in those settings. And so I do have to like keep feeling brave and keep trusting that it's okay to talk about those things, because I have a past of showing up in these very senior management roles as a woman and talking about things like feelings and getting kind of shit on for talking about that or making time and space for those things. Granted, I think we're all much more aware and more emotionally intelligent in those settings now. And so I think there's more room for those conversations, but that's one of my blocks that I'm working on, is like being honest and being trusting those instincts and trusting the intuition, because it still feels scary to talk about it sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But the more I talk about it, the more fun it is and the more things I see happen to people. So it's like I'm getting encouraged to do it, but then there are certain environments where I'm like, is it going to be okay? And then I do it and then it's always okay. But
Yeah.
that's still, there's still a little bit of that.
Yeah. So in those moments, what gives you the courage to lean into what seems to be like your magic sauce, right? Where I'm following my intuition and you see it as Jaime sees it, no one else, right? And so you're like, this is where I'm actually helpful. Like this is my reflection. This is my magic that I bring here. How do I know that? How do you jump in that moment and go like,
Yeah, it's such a good question. And I think it's an important one for everybody to identify for themselves. Like, where do you feel when you get up to that point? Like, how do you feel? And then how do you feel when you jump and do the thing that's scary? And I think for me, you talk about this a lot, and you brought awareness to this for me. Like, it's a feeling in my body for sure. I get up to the point. So I'll use an example. So I had a client really recently who was a C-level executive. I do some C-level executive coaching. He was kind of well, he was a man. I'm trying to say like he was super masculine or like machismo, but he wasn't. He was just a dude. And I came to the sessions with this idea that like, well, guys don't want to talk about the like woo-woo spiritual stuff. So I came into it with that block and that sort of, incorrect story. And so and he's C-level and he works for corporations. And so I got up to that moment where I was like, should I talk about this or not talk about it? And I had this really heavy feeling in my chest of like, C-level executives don't want to spend time talking about this shit. And then there was a moment in my brain where I was like, he found me. So and the stuff I hopefully feel like I put out into the world is pretty expressive of who I am. I do hold back a little bit, but I think in general, if you're watching any of my videos, you get a sense that like, I'm going to take you on a little journey. And so I got to that moment, I felt this tightness, and then I was like, okay, I'm going to take you somewhere a little bit weird. Are you willing to go with me there? And he was like, totally, let's do it. And we did it. And afterwards he was like, oh, I need to do more of that. And I was like, that's why I do this. That's why I do this, because he probably doesn't have a space where he can go to this place. And I took him through visualization. It was very like insightful for him. And so it's the knowing from experience that on the other side of that, I feel expansive. I felt blocked when I walked up to that place, and then getting on the other side of it, I feel expansive. And the only way you know that is by just bucking up and doing it for the first time. And maybe you'll fall off and it won't feel good. But one of those times when you get to that place and you try it, you're going to feel this like expansiveness where like, that's it. Okay. That's the feeling.
The other side of this closed chest feeling, right?
Yeah.
So I love that, because I do a lot of that body stuff. So like now that's your tell, I call it, right? So it's like for you, it's this kind of squeezy chest feeling. And it's like, once you start to get a good relationship with that, you're like, oh, this is that doubting my intuition. So I need to take a deep breath and expand, because on the other side of this is expansive, right? And so it's almost just that little tell where I call it like, I get throw-uppy. I'm like, oh, I feel throw-uppy. This must be the right way to go. Like it feels a little scary. It feels pushing on the edge, but it's jumping off the cliff, right? And knowing that you can fly, right? And so it's that moment of trusting that you're going to be fine. So
I think it's important because some people are like, oh, I feel like I'm going to throw up. That must be my intuition telling me I shouldn't do this. And I think it's an important distinction that like no one can tell you except you how that feels. But for me, like the throw uppy feeling that I shouldn't do it is way like farther down for me. Like it's way more like I'm like, I literally have to go in the bathroom and like make myself throw up kind of feeling if it's not right for me. But the tightness in the chest for me is like, okay, I'm just scared going into this, and like, it's not going to kill me. I just feel scared. And this feeling of scared, I want less of it. So the more I test it and the more I push it, the more I go into those meetings now. And I'm like, I'm just going to do it. Let's go straight there. Like the last time I worked with a guy, and I am sorry that I'm doing this because I want to work with men and women. It was just a block for me. But the last time I went into my first session with a male client, I'm like, we're doing a visualization. Like first thing, we're not going to talk. We're just going right in. And it felt so good because I'm like, I just need to get that out of the way because this is where I'm going to take you, and you got to get ready for this. And so I think that's a big thing for people just to be aware of, that like there's the feeling that like I'm scared but it's not going to kill me, and then there's the feeling that like I need to listen to my gut because it's trying to tell me that this is wrong.
Right.
And
And those are
just,
different for everybody,
yeah,
right? Because like this feeling for you might be the wrong feeling for someone else. It's about
exactly.
getting to know what these feelings, and just like emotions, right? The more you feel them, the easier they are. They're not so intense. They become like just your guiding points of like, oh, I feel angry, instead of like ruining your whole day and lighting everything on fire. Like the more you get used to experiencing your feelings inside your body, the more they become just like information for you, and they become less like
Totally. Yeah.
intense. Yeah,
Yeah.
super cool.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. I'm just going to do my little me thing, but you were saying like you set up with this man and you're like, I'm just going to do this for him and I'm going to start there so you know where I'm taking you. And what I thought was so interesting listening to it was like, this is for you, and you're saying it's for him, but you're like, really what I hear is I'm going to set the intention of my intention for myself here so that we know where we're going, right? And so that I'm telling myself, trust yourself. This is where I'm setting the stage for me to trust myself. And
Yeah.
it's so funny how we can tell ourselves like, I'm going to do this for you, so but it's really always about us, right? And getting really grounded and moving through there, right? So it's like a fun little game to always catch ourselves.
Yeah, 100%. And like sometimes, this is what coaches are so good for. It's like, even if I'm thinking the same thing you're thinking, I used different words, and sometimes we don't realize what we're saying. And then it's like, oh, wait, other people can hear what you're saying. So be aware of
Right.
the way that you phrase it, because yes, 100%. Like I needed to do that so that I could get past that tight feeling, so that I could have these open sessions and not go into the session with a tight chest, to be expansive and be myself and feel like I was bringing myself. And that was totally about me, but also to want to create like the best experience for both of us in these sessions. But yeah, it was like, I needed to do it. Like, I just needed to get past that point. So 100%,
Totally.
you're totally right.
Okay. So, within your work, we have this new question that we're playing with. It's how do you, with the gifts that you have and the giving and the intuition and being open, right? And trusting yourself to leap and be open, how do you take care of yourself? Like, how do you protect yourself? How do you show up in the world in that way and still not feel depleted or whatever it is for you?
That I love that question because it's really hard. And I think it's hard for everyone, no matter what you do for a living, right? Like, how do you protect yourself from bringing work home or like thinking about it all the time? This is something I've been working on my entire life. And I think even last week, I had to really dig deep to to figure it out, because I was getting pulled into the weeds with a client and was having a hard time keeping myself keeping myself above water. So I think for me, like rituals and routine are really important. And I had this conversation with a friend who recently, she does a lot of traveling, and we both talked about how we love spontaneity and we've sort of fought routine our whole lives, but to really keep ourselves grounded, routine is what does it for us, even though we like pushed against it for so long. So I need to keep my morning routine to keep myself grounded and protected. I can't give up on that time. I can't put it to the side because I have a lot of work to do. It's imperative. And then I think boundaries. That's a really big thing. Sometimes I tend to put I'm a mom, so I tend to put other people's needs before mine. And so sometimes that means if a client's asking for time from me, sometimes my first instinct is like, oh yeah, I can do that. And then I look at my calendar, I'm like, really? Can I do that? I can, like technically there's an opening, but if I do it, I'm not going to be doing the work the way I want to work, which is the whole reason why I went out on my own. So boundary setting and like sticking to my boundaries and not having any guilt or shame or like lack of worth around saying yes or no is another really big one for me.
That's huge for everybody and
Yeah.
challenging, right? Especially when
Really
you're our own
challenging.
boss, because you feel like, well, I should just say yes all the time, right? Like
Yes.
just me. And then
Oh,
you're
what am
like,
I going to lose? Like, I may lose the client, and I never lose the client. I only lose the client when I over schedule, and then they get sort of like not the best experience.
right. So amazing. So much good fodder there. I'll talk more about that one. Okay. And then what scares you now? What's next?
So this idea of like really leaning into my intuition and really getting centered in that. So the thing that really scares me is I've been wanting to write a book for a really long time.
Mm.
Besides the fact that when I say that out loud, it already sounds like an overwhelming amount of work. So that's block number one. But also the way I want to write the book is like really weird because it feels like, oh my God, there's so many ideas and so many things I want to write about. How do I choose? How do I make sure people care? How do I make sure I'm not writing what someone else wrote? And so I decided to make it feel easy. I'm just going to be a channel and I'm just going to let it flow. Which is, I guess, what people call a rough draft. And so I'm just going to like not fight it and just let it all pour out wherever it comes from, wherever it lands, however it lands, and not try to like stop myself or over edit or overthink. I literally want to think of it as like I am channeling information from some other place, because when I think about that, I'm like, oh, cool. All I need to do is make sure my hand works, be able to type, and I don't have to worry about like my brain getting in the way of like trying to figure out what it is that I'm writing. And like, I need an outline and I need a blah, 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 and this and that. So that's my next thing. I'm really scared, but that's been my new way of thinking about it. So it doesn't feel like a lot of work. I'm just like, cool, I just need to turn on the channel and then I just let it go like a waterfall.
Cool. So it's like you've already handled you feel the fear parts. Do they bubble up? Do they bubble back down? Like,
well, yeah, I haven't started it yet. So I've been talking about it for years, different versions of this book. So one's been started and put down. So yes, it bubbles up constantly because my brain starts to figure out, well, what is this thing? Like it has to have a meaning and it has to have a purpose and it has to have a reason and it has to have an audience and it has to have a point. And then I get really like, that's where the fear starts to, like the chatterbox, like the negative chatterbox that's like, no, you don't have the skills to be able to do this. And so that's why now, like, just shifting my idea around it of like, no, it's not mine. I'm channeling someone else's words. So right. I don't have to worry about whether it's good or bad because it's not mine.
Right. Wow. The idea of just doing it and not being attached to the outcome. Yeah. Right. Like I'm just going to get it out of me. I've been talking about it for a really long time. So cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sounds like you need a dartboard with some ideas about how to, what are the steps to dare yourself into writing the book. We'll talk more about that, but we love our dartboards, our dare darts, right?
Yes.
That's what got us to this, right?
Yeah, just put it out there. And that's the thing with writing, that, I mean, there are places to put it for sure that I could like put it out there. But the thing with writing is usually that the normalized idea of it is you go into hiding and you don't talk to anyone. And then you come out and there's a book. It's like going into this like birth chamber or something. And when we do dare darts, we're just like, cool, put it out there. Like, I'm just going to put out a landing page on my website and see what happens. I'm just going to like create this event. I'm just going to like launch this YouTube series. With writing, it's a little bit different because it doesn't feel as public. So I have to find public ways to share it so that I can just like get it out there and ship it and not have an attachment to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe it's a different way of thinking of like dare darts. Maybe there's like things on the way to creating an actual book. Maybe it's like 20 minutes a day. I dare myself this week to sit down for 20 minutes a day and write something.
Yes,
I
need to write that down.
I like that. right? It's like, what are the steps, right? Like, I'm going to sit for an hour and just think about it, you know, or whatever it is, like just putting the things that get you there, like that maybe it's not about sharing it yet, but it's about how do I get myself into it and actually create something.
Yeah. And
You
you know
know,
how I need to think of it too? What I really loved about Deep, when we talked to Man Like Deep, he
Mhm.
talked about his like side gigs as self-care.
Yeah.
And I think I need to think about it like that too. So it's not like I need to have like a finished product by XYZ and set these goals. It's like, no, this is a way to nurture myself and like, go through a practice that is ultimately self-care.
Yeah.
um is a better, and then like making sure I set aside time for it. It's immovable time. So it's not like, oh, I gotta write this book because I have this like end game. It's like, no, I'm writing because it feels good and like it's a part of my ritual and it's a part of my routine.
Yeah. And maybe
Love
take the
that.
word need out of it.
Yes.
Maybe it's not a need. Maybe it's, I want to. So how do I want to
Yes.
do it? Right. Right. Because need
Yes.
makes me like, I'm like, well, I don't want to make that list. That sounds terrible. Right.
Yes.
So it's like, what do I want to do? Like, and even if it makes me feel a little nervous, right? What are the things that make me feel a little bit sweaty nervous about this? Right. It's like, okay, well, making time every day, no matter what. And when the
Yeah.
client calls and says, hey, do you have an extra 20 minutes? You're like, no,
Yeah.
because it's booked, right? And it's booked
Exactly.
with what you've decided is the part that feeds you, right? This is part of your self-care because you need to get this out of you. And that's part of, right? You've been holding on to this for how long?
Yeah.
And
Too long.
that to me is, you know, stuffing, 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 stuffing. And that's where we start to gather stuff that doesn't feed us and isn't healthy, right? And so even if it means nothing and you just get it out of your body, right? Who knows what it's going to turn into? But if you do it from there, where it's like, I just need to get this out, this needs to come out of me. And that sounds awesome. And that's healing to myself, right? That is self care.
Yeah.
Whatever happens, happens after that.
Totally. I love that. And that's the thing. It's all about reframing these things, that we want to do or have felt like obligated to do. If you feel too obligated, it doesn't bring you joy. You can just stop it. And it's funny because the book, I'm always like, oh, it's kind of like trying to differentiate between those two feelings in my body. I'm like, is it an obligation or is it self-care? Because when it feels like an obligation, I just put it to the side but then I spend the whole time thinking like, oh, but now I'm disappointing myself. But
And
when you,
why?
yeah,
But why, right? Are you disappointing yourself because you think you have to do this?
exactly.
And you told yourself you have to? Because if so, light it on fire and throw it away and see if it comes back.
Yeah.
Right. Like, because if it's not something you really want to do and it's just something that you put on your you must do this, then have the experience of absolutely crushing that and getting rid of it and seeing what you want to do, you
Yeah.
know?
And that's why it's a fine line between those things, because if we carry it for too long, it starts to feel like an obligation.
Yeah.
But really, for me, it is this like, I need to purge. And what happens with the purge doesn't matter, but I do need to purge it. And I know that about myself. Whatever is in there needs to be purged. And I think it's why I have this problem with like feeling like I'm really saying my truths or saying, or like all the things that Stephanie talked about, like really being true and honest and authentic and saying the things that you want to say. I feel like I haven't been able to do that because I haven't purged whatever this thing is in there. And writing is my process in general. And so I feel like I need to go through a writing purge process as self-care, but detach myself from all the like, I have to do it. I need to do it. It's an obligation. It's something I put on my to-do list, and reframe it. And I think the reason it feels the same as trying to understand when your body is telling you no and when your body is telling you you're just scared. For me, this process is the same. If I tell myself it's self-care and I'm just like, there's no outcome and there's no goal and there's no timeline, it's just a purge and I get to do it every day and it's a part of my routine, there's no pressure. And so that's the like, I need to find that place in my body where I'm like, is it obligation or is it really something that I want to hold on to and want to do out of a want, out of a desire, and not out of a like, I told myself I would do it. I better
Yeah.
do it.
It's so funny. I'm so glad you used that word because that's all I've been hearing. It's like there's a deep, deep desire to get this out of your body. And if you can just tell yourself that, right? Every day before you sit down and write, and it's like, this is about me. I have a huge desire to get this out of me. And so let's just start today, whatever comes out. And it's like not having rules around it and not having expectations and just seeing what happens and see what comes out. Cause that's where the magic is, right? Cause allowing that, it's like, who knows what it's going to be. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why I like the note cards, right? Where it's like, just sit down with note cards and just write an idea, and just let them go. Right. And then you can always come back to them and make the story, or you can always put it together and be like, what is this? But if it's about just getting it out, then set yourself like a 20-minute note card or a half an hour, whatever it is. And like, just get some stuff out.
Yeah.
And then let it turn into whatever it is. But if it's about, that's what heals you and that's the deep desire, then it's as important as any other ritual, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's an important thing for people to realize too, if you're thinking about like going into a new job, and if it's starting to feel like, well, I told everybody I was going to like be I'll use myself as an example. Like I was going to be the managing director of an advertising agency in Europe. Like that was my thing. And that was where I was going. And that was my goal. And I needed to get there. And I was talking about it all the time to bring it into fruition. But then it just became a thing that like I then had to do because I told people I would, and I wanted to do what I said I would do, instead of realizing somewhere along the way that like, this isn't right for me. I'm ready to make a change. And so I think there's also that moment of like, okay, is it deep in my gut telling me no, or is it just up here and I'm feeling a little scared? That's the moment where it's like, just detach yourself from the outcome. You might go from one job to a job that like isn't going to be at the same level financially or like for society and the way that your status looks, but somewhere in your body, that you're at a moment where you can just get over the hurdle and feel expansive, or you're just going to sit there like telling yourself all the things you're obligated to do that don't feel good to you, and you should just crush it and burn it and light it on fire and get rid of it and start something else. There's that moment for all of us. It's different for all of us, but I think it's really important for people who are watching this to realize that like that moment exists for all of us. And like, if you let go of the outcome and you just become the channel for whatever it is that's coming to you next, it changes the dynamic in your brain from I have to do X, Y, Z to become successful to I just have to do this thing that feels good and show up for myself every day.
And that interesting part of to be successful. And then there was this other layer of to look the part or look successful or be something to others, right? What does it look like out in the world? And like, I feel like magic is about not caring and just being authentic. And that shift of like, it doesn't matter what it looks like, as long as I'm being authentic, it'll feel magical. And that's all that matters, right? If you walk through the world, because when you step into that in your work, you're like, that's where it's juicy and amazing. And that's where everyone else is like, whoa, it's like, I just talked to Jaime, it's like, yeah, you did, and that's different than talking to Tracy or anyone else, right? And it's like, and when you live in that truth and you can keep leaning into the part that makes you feel weird and special and all those other things, like, and the parts that, feel, are really, it's truly where the reward is.
Yeah. I always think about recently, because I don't know, sometimes I fall down Netflix rabbit holes of like watching teen like rom-coms. And I think what's interesting about watching teen rom-coms now versus when I was a teenager is that the female characters are so much more empowered now. And so it makes me think of those characters, these female characters that are like super nerdy. And the whole movie is about how you're going to make them over and they're going to take off their glasses and take down their bun. And now they're going to be the popular girl. And every time I watch one of those movies, I'm always like, that girl is so badass before she took her glasses off. And now she just looks like everyone else. And I think that's the big message too, when you watch people on Instagram or you see all these like, you know, social media posts, especially when you like hashtag a location that you were just in, and then you look at all the other pictures from that location and you're like, no, I'm not a half naked teenager on the beach. I'm just like watching a sunset. But I think it's interesting to think about that too. Like you might think the optics are one thing, like you have an idea that like, well, the optics look like this, where what you don't realize is that actually people want you to be more authentically yourself. People are craving that. Like they want to see you and your real true self instead of like some just Instagram filtered selfie that looks like everything else. It's so much more fun and interesting to like fall into the pocket of somebody's like little internal world where you're like, oh shit, that is cool. That is different. That's unique. That's totally obviously authentically theirs. They need to keep the glasses on because they're super badass.
Right. Yeah. And that's where inspiration comes, right? Like, to me, when someone's being that and speaking their truth and authentic, and you can feel that, you're like, ooh, what am I doing? Right? Like, am I, you know, and I feel like that is, to me, I would say like, that's how you heal the planet, right? It's like, that's how you, the more authentic, the more you walk in it, everyone around you goes, right? Like, I can do that. Right. And it chips away the expectations and the ideas of what the optics are, what everyone's saying. And it's like, that's no longer what everyone's believing. It's just watching someone walk in their truth. And that's inspiring. And that's infusing. And, you know, I just think it truly is healing for people.
Yeah, totally agree. Yes.
So cool.
Yeah. Well, thanks for this. Thanks for the suggestion. It's really helpful to even just talk about things out loud, you know, just to like sort of see how they feel when you say it out loud. And if it falls right, you know, like, is that what I do? Is that how I want to talk about it? It's also a good practice on that side.
Right.
So.
I mean, that's what I'm going to say the summit again, but as we're talking, like the big thing is about being in person and reflecting, right? And so talking about your magic, and just like we just did, it's like, okay, well, does that feel authentic? Are you using, this is what I'm hearing, and this is what it feels like when you talk about it, right? Like all that stuff, so we can really take ownership of, you know, what am I putting out in the world, and what do I want to put out in the world, and who do I want to be walking through the world, and really redefining that and really shining it up and walking brighter, 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 and having the courage to do that, because you're going to have support and practice doing that. And that I'm really excited about, because we all need it all the time.
I know. Yeah. Agreed. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for this, Tracy. I can't wait to interview you.
Yeah. Woo-hoo, my turn in the hot seat.